Hi, I'm Skip Nipper. Welcome to my podcast,
where I tell you about not only Nashville's great baseball history and traditions,
shot to right, a one-hop liner,
but certainly about its past. And you will hear a little bit about its present and future, too.
Yes, he can. It makes the waist-high catch.
There are great stories about Tom Wilson Park, Herschel Greer Stadium, Sulphur Dell, and the players, coaches, and fans who love everything about baseball. And every once in a while, you will get to hear from a special guest who will share their fondness and even passion for the great game.
It's a high fly ball down the right field corner, going way back, hits a lead-off home run.
I'm excited to have this friend on this podcast because he's very meaningful to me and so many other researchers. I met Mark Aubrey through Society for American Baseball Research. That's SABR, and you can go to sabr.org if you'd like to know more. He lives in the Knoxville area, actually in Seymour, and his history with SABR is, how do I want to say this, research extraordinaire. I think he does a wonderful job, and he spends a lot of time doing not just Negro Leagues history, but he does other things about Knoxville baseball. Tennessee Volunteers, for example, some of the other small cities around in the Appalachian League and what have you. But today we're going to talk about the Negro Southern League and the Knoxville Giants and the Nashville White Sox and beyond, because there's so much more to talk about. So I want to introduce you to Mark Aubrey and say, Mark, thank you for doing this. I am really grateful.
Well, Skip, thank you so very much. I value our friendship. I value our you want to call it professional baseball history knowledge. You've been a great inspiration for me on a number of smaller projects, and you've helped guide me through some little bit bigger projects, and I really appreciate that.
And this life is all about sharing. We researchers don't seem to hold on to things too much. If we hide it, it'll never get told. And there's so many treasures out there, and you've dug up treasures on Knoxville baseball, and I think that's outstanding. I want to talk a little bit about Negro Southern League to get started here because, in 2020, we celebrated the 100th anniversary of the Negro League, specifically because the Negro National League was organized in 1920, February the 13th in Kansas City, to be exact. And soon after, the Negro Southern League was formed. And there were teams from the South, obviously, and Tom Wilson was one of them who owned a ball club here in town. So what can you tell me about the Negro Southern League from the very beginning, how it got organized and how meaningful that was to the cities in the South?
Yeah, on March 3rd, 1920, just a few weeks after the Negro League was formed in Kansas City, as you said, on March 3rd, team leaders met in Atlanta, and they formed the Negro Southern League. It's interesting because they had various representatives from, I believe, teams that wanted to be in the league, but they settled on 8. But the original 8 wasn't the 8 that we know today. This is the league that we know as of the 1920 Negro Southern League. Montgomery Gray Sox, Atlanta Black Crackers, New Orleans Caulfield Ads, the Knoxville Giants, the Birmingham Black Barons, the Nashville White Sox, Pensacola Giants, and the Jacksonville Stars. So you had a couple teams from Florida all the way up into Tennessee. So there was a stretch of miles to go on the rail cars or however the teams actually got there. Originally, also at that meeting was Chattanooga and Greenville, South Carolina. They wanted a berth in the league. For whatever reason, newspaper reports don't say why they didn't get in, but the first initial reports that came out, and it was syndicated through the newspapers up to Indiana and throughout the Southeast, Chattanooga was a team. They were part of the league. Jacksonville was not listed. A couple weeks later, Chattanooga disappears from the discussion.
Right.
Jacksonville is in. So why? I don't know, but that's the way it happened.
I often wondered if it had to do with finances. You mentioned rail cars, whether they could get there to a certain city via rail, which had to be the way everybody traveled. I don't remember seeing any instances where they went by boat and the rivers wouldn't have gone to all those cities.
I did a bit of mapping using today's Google Maps as a reference point, and this is from Nashville, distances to other league teams from Nashville using today's Google.
Right.
Atlanta is about 250 miles.
Yeah.
To Birmingham, 191. to Jacksonville, 683 miles. Not something you do overnight quickly.
Right.
Knoxville is about 180. Montgomery from Nashville is about 280. New Orleans, 531. And Pensacola, 442. So these were not, let's hop in the car and go down the road a bit.
Right.
And we're there. It took planning for the schedule so you can make a sweep and make your miles count. But it was rough.
Yeah.
It wasn't easy.
Yeah. So it had to be by rail because cars weren't really around. I mean, obviously buses and things like that. So it had to be by rail. And I just wonder if some of these guys that own these teams took a look at where the distances were, as you've done in your research, which I think is fantastic, to say, I don't think we can get there. And certainly we can't get there and make it pay for us if we got to pay a player or players and pay expenses to get there too.
Yeah, I don't know that the players were paid that much.
Yeah.
The gate was taken. Varied whatever arrangements they had. Generally, the home team would get the bigger share of the gate, but you had to entice the team to come. I've never seen an actual schedule. Here's the schedule for the 1920 Negro Southern League. Yay!
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
I have tracked along with other researchers, Larry Lester, Ted Knorr, Kevin Johnson, Bill Plott, Gary Ashwell, and others have been very instrumental. They put together a simple spreadsheet. Who played who when?
Right.
What was the score?
Right.
Unfortunately, when I got that spreadsheet a couple years ago, there were no sources to it. So my project over the last couple of years has been, let's source out. Let's find a newspaper report that says Knoxville went to Nashville. They played 3 games. Here are the scores.
Right.
If it's a score, just written in a story, I'll take it. If it's a line score, better. If it's a box score, that's just heaven.
When you first started researching, did you have to do all your research at the library?
I did a lot of research down at the McClung Historical Center in Knoxville, a wonderful research library for genealogy and local history. And it was just microfilm, just cranking through day by day. And I was also looking for Appy League games that Knoxville would be involved with, but it was just cranking through, marking up a print form, sending the microfilm off, getting it printed. Maybe I have to come back in a week to pick it up. But now with the advent of the booming internet and the newspaper archives there, either through Chronicling America, which is the Library of Congress interface, or various paid sites, newspapers.com, the Tennessee Electronic Library has the Tennessean and I believe has some of the Knoxville papers available. Our local public libraries also have that available. I can research at 11 o'clock last night.
Yep. Yeah, that's how I spend my day. You see behind me, I'm in the baseball bedroom. It's not our bedroom. We're not that crazy about it, but I have my things here. But I come in here, my wife knows where I am. In fact, she says baseball is my other woman, so she doesn't worry about me when I'm up here doing my research. And I can get up. I don't get up very often early in the morning, but it's easy to get online and go to newspapers.com. One of the great things about Sabre is they have the black newspapers research opportunity for you as well. Anyway, I talked too much. I want to go back just a little bit because the owners that were listed in the original organization of the Negro Southern League did not include Tom Wilson. That came a little...
Yeah, it came a little bit later. So you asked me a lead-up question, what was Tom Wilson's involvement in the league?
Right.
And I said, I don't know. I know Tom Wilson was a baseball fixture. In the 1920s, he became more of a businessman.
Right.
Prior to that, he was playing some sandlot and probably industrial baseball. But it's like, I really don't know. And I said, I need to ask Sip this question. And I said, let me do a little bit more research. So I put in Tom Wilson, Nashville, 1920. And what pops up? A Sabre biography written by Skip Nipper. So I get to throw your words back in your face, such as it is.
I'm not that smart. The references are the smarter than I am. So.
Well, that's okay. So it appears that he formed or incorporated the Nashville Negro Baseball Association and Amusement Company at the end of March in 1920. Yeah. So that's a couple, 2.5, 3, 4 weeks after the Negro Southern League was formed. But who was sent to the meeting in Atlanta? That was Marshall Garrett, who at the time was a 34-year-old tailor, and J.W. White. were the
Right.
representatives from Nashville. I'm not familiar with J.W. White. Garrett went on to be the manager of the team.
He did. Yeah, that's right.
And then they elected officers for that league. And R.H. Tabor, he was elected the vice president of the league.
Yeah.
I don't see him pop up too much, except that I believe Garrett and Tabor were part of the investors in
Right.
Tom Wilson's venture.
Adventure, right. Yeah.
And I think from your notes, it was the Standard Giants that he purchased and formed them into the Nashville White Sox.
Yeah. I always wondered why he called them the White Sox. I mean, there's an obvious answer to that. They probably wore white socks, which is the same for the Major League Red Sox, White Sox, red stockings, for example, for the Reds. So my guess is, but I don't know why he abandoned the name Standard Giants, but he resurrected it, at least with the part Giants, and with an unusual pronunciation of E-L-I-T-E is elite, not elite Giants. All those Negro League teams. I think they all liked the idea of the New York Giants name and how popular they were and how strong they had been at the turn of the century. So that's my guess there. But Tom Wilson had some hand in it. But from there, I'm not positive, other than going on with the Nashville Elite Giants and ultimately moving them to Baltimore.
Yeah, the Pensacola Giants.
Yeah, right.
And it was the Jacksonville Stars, but Giants was a semi-common name for colored teams.
Right, yeah. You love the Negro Southern League, I know, because I've read what you have written and the places that you have posted on. But you have researched other things, including the Knoxville Giants specifically, because you're trying to put together their schedule. And I applaud you for that with box scores, which is probably the most difficult thing about researching Negro Leagues history. Would you agree?
Yes, they are unicorns.
Yeah.
Some papers, Birmingham, some of the New Orleans papers would publish full box scores.
Right.
The maddening thing that I find about the research, and it's not just the 1920s, anytime in the early creation of baseball, they advertise in the newspapers. This team is going to play this team, 3 o'clock today.
Yeah.
Seats reserved for whites, 50 cents at the gate. It's like, oh, great. Now I know that Team A was with Team B. And I look the next day to find a result, and there's nothing. And I look the next day, and then I search, okay, well, this was Nashville and Knoxville. Let me look at all the Knoxville papers. There were 2 major Knoxville papers at the time. Nothing. I look in the Nashville papers. Oh, well, let's look at maybe Atlanta because it's a league.
Yeah.
No, not so much. Yeah. So that's one of the frustrating things of sort of I've been trying to figure out, which leads me to an interesting part going back to the Nashville side. I've mapped out the whole of their schedule. I have a couple of dates that I've got a score for from other researchers, but no source. Right. I'm leaving those in my research.
Sure, I would. Yeah.
But when you get down to the end of June and through the whole of July, Nashville doesn't show up anywhere.
Right.
Not in the papers, nothing. It's like, that's a whole month. Where are they?
Yeah.
So maybe they're, no, because it's not with another team. The other team is playing somebody else. Right. So I don't know if they just took a hiatus for a month. If it was too hot, I don't think so. This was their livelihood. Tom Wilson wanted some gate receipts.
Yeah, he sure did.
His investors wanted some gate receipts. I don't know what it was. I thought, oh, maybe they're just on an extended tour. A lot of the teams would play non-league teams.
Exactly.
It was just, coincidental that they happened to be in town, or there was a free weekend as Nashville or Knoxville was passing through to the next town. Hey, let's play the locals. Let's, we're going to get some revenue out of this. We're here. Let's make some coin. Nashville, I've only found 3 non-league games, and it was the St. Louis Stars. Nashville got clocked all 3 games, but they're sort of an outlier. They don't play other teams.
Yeah.
Knoxville played a lot of other teams.
Right.
So it's a little weird. I don't know what happened. So at the end of the year, the Chicago Defender, a large black newspaper, of course, from Chicago, listed the final standings for the clubs. And they have Nashville down as 40-40. And my research shows something different.
The newspapers were the ones that we have to depend on to report that, because as far as I know, there's no bookkeeping journal that shows receipts for the Nashville White Sox, for example, or I'm probably the same for all those teams. If you could ever find those, then that would give you some background that would be helpful. I think some of those have been recovered from later years in the 40s. But
Yeah,
the newspapers were not, they wouldn't send a reporter out to watch those games, I guess. And all the things that we read about have to have been reported by the teams themselves. And so I don't know if Tom Wilson's game was over that night, he didn't call the newspaper the next morning. He's ready to advertise for the next game or whatever.
sure. And you'd think that with Tabor being the secretary for the league and being with Nashville, he'd maybe have a little bit of influence and say, let's get the Nashville records in here.
Yeah, great point.
But Nashville didn't do super well that season.
Yeah.
So maybe it's like, we don't want to share bad news here.
Yeah.
It's poor press to say, hey, look, we've lost our last 5 games. Come out and see us. We're great.
Yeah.
So I really don't know where they went. So the notes are, I find that Nashville played at least 45 games through the season.
Yeah.
Chicago has them at 40 and 40, so we're missing 35 games somewhere.
Correct.
If we are to believe the standings.
Yeah, and that whole month that you said is missing or more could be where those are.
Possibly. The White Sox had an overall record of 15 and 30 for all games played.
Yeah, that's the way it goes around here these days.
They played 42 NSL games, 15 and 27, which is a 357% winning percentage. And like I said, they lost 3 to the St. Louis Stars, so it's a big goose egg on the non-league games.
Right. That's amazing. That's fantastic. I love that you've been able to find those kind of records.
Yeah, I'm still, like I said, I'm still missing a few. I'm sure there are more games to be found.
Right.
I just found one or two last week.
Yeah.
I thought that most of my research had been done. I go back and spot check, double check. Hey, here's another 2 games. One was an actual score, and it says, this is the second game in a row that Nashville has won from whatever the team was. Right. So it's not quite. There's no line score. There's no score that I can put in, but I can put in a win in the win column.
Yeah, there you go. But you keyed in on the Knoxville Giants because there you are in Knoxville. Now, how good were the Knoxville Giants that season?
The Knoxville Giants were pretty good. They had a force of a lineup. Literally, Bill Force was one of their pitchers.
Yeah.
But Steel Arm Dickey and One Wing Maddox, or Wing Maddox, depending who you talk to.
Great names,
Wonderful players. Dickey is reported to have won 25 straight games. I'm guessing that goes back to 1919. There was a Knoxville Giants in 1919. There's actually a Knoxville Giants in 1905. But tracing the team, I would go from 1919 is when they really started. They were playing a team from Cuba. They were playing local teams. They played the Birmingham Black Barons. So that's how the Knoxville Giants, what we consider the 1920 Knoxville Giants, got their start.
Where would they play their games, Mark?
Where did they? It was a place called Booker T. Washington Park.
Right.
It's over in East Knoxville. It has since been overwritten by housing development. It was actually Brewers Park prior to that. Black teams would play there. In 1920, a black conglomerate came together and made the Booker T. Washington Park Association.
Gotcha.
And they tended to it. It only lasted for about 3 years until like I said, a housing development came through. And I'm assuming it was just sold out. It was a meeting place for colored folks. They have dances, gatherings, picnics, and festivals, along with baseball.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we had Greenwood Park here at the turn of the century, which had a amusement park and other things like that. There's a cemetery there now. There are actually 2 cemeteries there where some of the Negro League players are buried, like Butch McCord and Sidney Bunch. But they played in Nashville with Sulphur Dell. So, in those days, that's where everybody played, was at Sulphur Dell. Well, there's a few other places. The fairgrounds had a spot, but I think most of the games here in town were played at Sulphur Dell.
Okay, so I was reading up, looking at newspaper ads and newspaper stories. The Nashville White Sox played at Athletic Park. Then the next week they played at Sulphur Dell.
Yeah.
They're the same, but when did the names change within the common folk?
Yeah, it was Athletic Park forever until 1908, and Grantland Rice was a sports writer here, and he called the area Sulphur Spring Dell because the area had been called Sulphur Spring Bottom. That's the general area for that low-lying area down between the Capitol and the river. And he added that to part of his rhyming. Fred Russell teased and said that he did that because he couldn't find anything to rhyme with bottom. So he came up with Dell, and the fans loved it, and he called it Sulphur Dell, lovingly, I think. But it continued. You can see in various articles, it continued to be referred to as Athletic Park also, but one and the same.
Yeah, it's good. You talked about how good was Knoxville. From my research, they played at least 113 games. So a little bit different than Nashville's 45-ish or so.
Interesting.
And that was against both Negro Southern League and independent teams. Overall, their record was 79, 31, and 3, which is a 718 winning percentage. For the NSL games, they were 48, 24, and 2, which is 667. The non-league games numbered 39, and they were 31, 7, and 1 for an 816 winning percentage. They were pretty good.
They were pretty good.
Yeah.
Right. Talk about some of the players. I know you mentioned a few a while ago, Wing Maddox and Steel Arm Dickey. Wing Maddox had
Pete
one
Cleed,
arm, right?
Yes, and I forgot which side it was.
Yeah.
There are photos out there. Gary C. has done a nice little baseball card mock-up of it.
Right.
He was just a wonderful player. And, of course, acrobatic. Like, was it Jim Abbott had one hand?
Yeah.
The modern player?
Yeah.
Semi-modern player.
Right.
Yeah, it was the same thing. He'd catch the ball, toss the ball, tuck his glove, or drop the glove and throw it to wherever it needed to be. He was an outfielder and a pitcher.
Yeah.
Other players on the Knoxville team, you had, here's one that was shared between the clubs, Norman Turkey Stearns.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about him.
Okay, well, I'll tell you about him then. If you know black baseball, you know the name of Turkey Stearns.
Yeah.
He was born in the Nashville area, came up through the Nashville system of ball clubs, not a organized minor league system that we have now, but local sandlot, local industrial leagues, and ended up he was just a teenager when he started in 1920.
He was born in 1901, so yeah.
Yeah, so he plays both as a pitcher and an outfielder for Nashville. At the end of the season, at the end of August, beginning of September, Knoxville secretary went up and spoke with Rube Foster's people in Chicago and said, hey, we've won the pennant. You guys have won the pennant. Let's get together and make this a hootenanny. Let's have a colored World Series. We can send our guys up there. You can send, typically what we think of as a typical World Series or playoff game, alternating fields. I think it was decided probably from Chicago's standpoint, hey, let's make this a tour of the South. Let's hit as many cities as we can. We'll stretch this thing out and get some coin in our pockets, and we'll see who's the best. So they planned a scheduled series of games through the South, through Chattanooga, which was not a league city, but it's very convenient to go from Knoxville to Chattanooga to Atlanta.
Right.
Or down to Birmingham. So they played in Birmingham. I believe they played in Atlanta, up into Knoxville again. And Norman Turkey Stearns was brought in as a ringer, along with some other players, for that series. Gary Asheville posted a box score a number of years ago. He's listed as Starnes, Starns or Starnes. I've got an article from early September where they say that he came over to Knoxville, and it's spelled actually both ways. Can I read you the article? It's very
sure, absolutely, yes.
2 paragraphs.
Yes.
This was published in the Journal and Tribune, the Knoxville paper, on September 5th, 1920. Norman Starnes, pitcher and outfielder of the Nashville Negro Southern League Club, reported yesterday and will be used by manager Brooks in the 13-game championship series with Montgomery to decide the pennant. Okay, I'm going to insert here. I was just talking about the Negro Colored World Series.
Yeah.
And he's like, wait, what is this series with Montgomery?
Yeah.
President Perdue of the Negro Southern League awarded Montgomery the championship. My research says if it was based on win-loss records, he did the wrong thing.
Right.
Basically, Knoxville has always claimed they were the champions. Who knows why, especially with a little bit of pull from Brooks as treasurer of the Negro Southern League. Why wasn't there a little bit more pressure put on to do the right thing? Who knows? Could have been politics. I'm not suggesting any graft, but who knows?
Who knows?
So they thought, well, let's play a 13-game series to determine who the winner of the league will be. Yeah. Well, that's ridiculous.
Sure,
who plays a 13-game series? It never came about. Right. So that's how Stearns was brought on. So back to the article. It will be remembered by Knoxville fans that Stearns was the man who broke up the last 2 games of the past Nashville Giants series with home run swats. He secured a home run in the second game with 1 on, and another in the third game with 2 on. He is also an effective pitcher. So that was the series at the end of August.
Gotcha.
And that series, Nashville took 2-1 in games 1, and that was the first series that Knoxville had lost. So back to the article, last paragraph. Stearns is considered to be the most dangerous hitters in the circuit. He has an inborn sense of fairness, however, for when he comes to the plate, he will always warns the opposing pitcher, quote, if you put the ball over the plate, I was going to knock it over the fence. And he generally does.
That's good.
It's a great little quote.
Yeah, it makes for good copy.
So there were other players. Pete Klieg was an infielder with Knoxville. He went on to become an umpire in the Negro Southern League. There are a lot of players. We only know their last name. We might know a nickname.
Right.
Really hard to track them down.
Sure.
I've spent Family Search is a wonderful genealogical site, going in and finding, but when you only have a name of Long or Howe or Harris, were they here for a week? Were they here for the whole season? Why don't we know their names? Why don't we know where they came from? Sometimes you do find a nugget. Team signs Joe Blow from Cleveland. Great. Now I've got something.
There you go.
But it's difficult to get down. And those are important. The men played. Their stories are important.